Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. So you see the crack in the windshield. Well, that's all Cindy, guys. That's her psychic abilities. She was freaking out, had to take her to the dentist, and her stress. This is what we really think happened. We think her stress just basically caused it to crack.
Well, we think so because I had to be moved twice to two different rooms, and the computers went down, and the x-ray machines went down. So, then we remembered the crack, and we're like, okay, that, I bet you it was that stressful moments.
Yeah, it's kind of like, reminds me of, what was that old film? I can't even remember.
Is it the fire starter?
Oh yeah, there was fire starter for sure. And then was it Carrie?
Yeah.
Carrie, yeah. So thankfully, Cindy stays in control most of the time.
Except for when things like this happen, the crack on the windshield, yeah.
So, yeah, we're heading out and moving around and go explore some new territories. And we were doing a lot of work with the guides, and really we have several videos worth we want to get across to you guys. And what we wanted to touch on, because we were just listening to Lloyd Pye, in case you guys haven't listened to Lloyd Pye, very interesting discussions, just talking about how there's no way that we evolved from the apes like they say we did. That's just absolute BS, complete BS, for many reasons. For one, bone density, our bones are not as dense as the primates. Our muscles are not as strong as the primates. They don't have a layer of subcutaneous fat like we do. And there are those that then use that to say, well, what does? And, well, whales do, dolphins do, thinking that maybe there's something to the story of Dagon and Oans that are these almost like merman type of beings. I think, what's his name? Atlantean Gardens. I think he did one on that, and that was really interesting. So, we started asking questions about our origins to the guides and going in a little more detail. And also the questions concerning Neanderthals and Denisovans and Cro-Magnon, because they all were, and they're gone now, though there are some of their genes in our DNA. But yet, what happened to them? What really happened to them? All three of those, bigger, stronger, and actually bigger brain capacity than us.
Right, and I started to... Okay, so, sorry. Yeah, I started to look at that information, and they were showing me that these beings were created. Unfortunately, they weren't super controllable. And when I went in to try to get more detail, this blackness started to cover it up. And Mike's like, well, are the guides not wanting to tell you? No, it wasn't the guides. There's some kind of a program. When you look out and look at these beings, it gets covered up with darkness because they don't want anybody knowing what happened. I guess they did this in anticipation because they knew that eventually we would figure these things out, how to look into the future or past.
And so I think you said it before, I was thinking it, and we the obvious question is, who did it? And so, the ones that we got that did it are really the ones that are in control right now, which are actually beings that do not come from here. There are, we would call them the Giga. They are from Mars. And they are the ones that we hear of in the Sumerian stories, rising up and saying, we're not going to work the mines anymore. Get somebody else to do it. So that's when the Anunnaki manipulated DNA, and we have at first perhaps Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal, and the Denisovans. Because we also asked, were they from somewhere else? And the answer was no, they're from here. They were created here. And so, they're basically, what they did was get rid of them because they were too much trouble.
yeah, their abilities were still too advanced. So in the making of these beings, they realized that the more advanced their pineal glands were, the more advanced their telekinesis abilities were, and mind reading abilities, the less able they were to control. So when it comes to us, humans that we know today, our abilities are coming back, but what they've done over time is kind of feed us poison, or get us to eat really bad sugars, high fructose corn syrup, fluoride in the water to keep our pineal glands from activating. But you can only hold nature down for so long. You can't hold nature down forever, and people's abilities are developing, and that's why they've had to do all these other treatments and all these other things to keep people upset, and voluntarily, giving themselves these treatments that slow down abilities.
So when we talk about the Gigi, we are talking about the beings with the elongated heads. And as we've said before, again, these beings with the elongated heads, yes, some cultures tried to emulate them because they came here and they had higher technology, and they knew more than the people that were here in a kind of diabolical way. They knew how to manipulate things, so they took over. And then some people did emulate them by, basically putting boards to the babies' heads. But there's skulls that don't match up with the plates and where the foramen magnum is in the brain. And those are the real Gigi. Those are the real ones that actually do come from Mars, which are under the control of the Anunnaki and ultimately of the Draco, the AI, Black Dragon, the Archonic forces.
Right, and I feel like people are just now really starting to understand how this creation happened, and how, the people that we see in power, they're not really the people in power, they're more like puppets. So once you start to understand that the leaders are not the real leaders, and the ones that are in control are off planet, then you can really get a grasp on what's really going on.
Yeah, think in terms of colony Earth. Think in terms of, overlords that are overseeing everything. That's really what's going on here. When we see presidents all of a sudden get a briefing, and then they come out and they look like they had just puked, and they're pale as ghosts, well, it's because they've been told, you know what? Humans don't run this planet. You know what? There's underground cities. There's reptilians in the cities. The top leaders are all basically possessed when you get down to it, overshadowed by these fourth density, for the most part, dark entities.
Right, and there's certain methods and certain ways they have to make it easier to overshadow, and one way is trauma, through trauma. Trauma growing up, past life trauma, so they can latch on through these energy fields and kind of get their hooks in, and then they can start to manipulate these beings. And it's really strange how it works. It is quite painful if you try to go against them, against their will. And it's almost like they have something, I don't know if they put chips in their head. I'm not sure exactly how that works. I just know that they're being controlled through methods and means that we're not told about.
So, if you're one of the masses that are saying, I just don't understand why our government does this. This is why, because it's not about the people. It's all about the fact that they view us as cattle, as sheep, as a herd, as an asset, as a commodity. That's it. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and they start teaching us to be little batteries for their companies at a very early age, starting in preschool, even Sunday school. Very, very little. They groom us to run their, organizations and their banks, and so all they have to do is sit back and collect and enjoy.
Yeah, it's a scary realization to have. Now, we did also get that the original beings here were light beings.
Definitely, and through a cycle, they were light beings. And on the downfall, as they're evolving, taken advantage of. And that's something, it's cyclical, and now we're coming out of that cycle. We're moving back into where we're more beings of light again, and certain entities have to drop off, not by choice, but they have to. It's the cycle of the planet. So there's no getting away or no getting around that cycle. Things absolutely have to move into the light, and as they do, I think some of you probably feel uncomfortable too, when it comes to facing certain demons or trying to get over certain traumas. It's no longer feasible for those traumas to hold on to you anymore. They're just too painful. So we're kind of grasping at straws, trying to figure out, how do I get over this trauma? Because this is really hurting me. This is really bothering me. And it's moment by moment, it's research, it's learning, it's kind of digging deep into whatever your trauma is and understanding it. But one thing we all have to do, we have to face it, because we're moving into the light, and it's same with them.
So yeah, there's validity to the yugas, the cycles. What we also got was about 60% of the souls on the planet right now, humans in current incarnation, were from here. This was their original incarnation. So that leaves 40% that are not originally from Earth. And again, even if a body was created here, that doesn't mean the soul, the spirit, was created here and our essence was not created by the Anunnaki.
Right, no, they've just utilized the essence to move into a body that's been manipulated, that's more apt to go by their guidelines and their suggestions, as long as they have control of that body from a very, very young age.
So it's, what they're doing is basically kind of like hijacking people's game, so to speak, hijacking their mission, and, keeping them in a lower vibrational frequency to keep them entrapped in that. It's not the case with all the souls that are currently incarnated. Again, there are many from other areas that are incarnating just for the reason to break the earth out of the darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. There are these volunteers that did some study and decided to come down and help break people into the light, or help guide them into the light, because it's been quite a difficult process, and it is a very painful process. But certain beings, they just have this ability to help guide people.
Yes, and so this is part of the entrapment. And, obviously we have been given a false history and a false narrative, and it's to keep this same cycle going. But this is the end of a bigger cycle. And, there is a split coming, divergence. And we were talking about the light bodies, and the light body is really the key. The Merkaba is the key to mobility throughout the densities, because without that fully activated, you're just basically limited to 3 and 4D.
Mm-hmm. Right. We have the opportunity to build these light bodies now, and sometimes it might take lifetimes to do, but it's just really important that we learn how to do it. That's one of the biggest secrets they keep from us, is the Ascension secrets, Ascension mysteries, and building our light bodies so we're not clamped down on this 3D world.
So you could put 2 and 2 together, and if you look back and say history repeats itself, and we look back and say, gosh, what happened to the Denisovans? What happened to the Neanderthals? Why are there no more Cro-Magnons? And we look to the stories from the Sumerian tablets, and again, you could throw Sitchin out the window, because there's hundreds of thousands of Sumerian tablets translated by thousands of different people now. Just look to the stories, and look to the story of perhaps what happened in Younger Dryas, when Enlil said, yeah, they're too damn noisy, they're not worth it, they're too much of a pain. Let's take care of this so I could get some sleep.
Right, so we have to view things with that perspective, understanding where your position is, in the eyes of these other beings that are the controllers, and start to take your life back, start to take control back. And I always feel we should start with our health, because we've pretty much handed that over to the medical system. Like, everybody is dependent, most people are dependent on a doctor or need some type of medical attention, or they're told that they have something, so they need this medicine. And all the ways of the planet have completely been buried and lost.
So, we need to look around, take a good look around, see everything that's happening, and realize history repeats itself. History repeats itself. History repeats itself. We could look back at our cousins, Neanderthals-Denisovans, and Cro-Magnons. History repeats itself, guys.
It does, and we're not any more special than they were, really, except for I think they can control us a little bit more, a little bit longer.
Yes, and so that's something to really keep in mind as to the bigger picture that's going on. And as we've said, too, this time's a little bit different because the Ascension process. At the other times, there really wasn't hope for masses ascending. Ascension is something that takes a lot of work, a lot of work. You have to be as dedicated almost as a Buddhist monk is. And you wonder why so many Buddhist monks, tens of thousands, have achieved the rainbow body. That's all they do. That's their entire life. And, they've done that groundwork. Now, what we have done in past lives does count in this life going forward. And, so I've shared with you guys a little bit, and I know I've had recollections of having a life as a Buddhist monk. In fact, 2. So there was a lot of work done on nothing but meditation, going within, and activating and building on the light body. And so, with some of us, and there's many of you guys that we've worked on out there, that you obviously have done that work too, because your light bodies are well along their way, and your abilities are growing exponentially. So a lot of you guys out there are going to be helping to initiate this new era in, and help to pull as many people as possible into the higher realms before we get to a split.
Understand that your job is very, very important, and it's really important that you take care of yourself. You eat good food, you exercise, be good to yourself, because like Mike always says, this is a marathon. This is a long haul thing, and it's just something that it's going to happen regardless. It's just, how do we want it to happen?
Exactly. And there's some of us that have been incarnating time after time after time, going against this system. And as we reclaim our memories and start to learn from what happened in the past and realize what they've done to us, then it'll just increase our resolve to not let it happen again.
As we move into the light, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Thank you guys for being part of the family. Make sure you're subscribed. Thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. If you need to reach us, it's evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail or EEARTS@protonmail.com.
God bless and namaste.
God bless. Namaste.